December 2004. The world watches, live, as the abyss opens. An undersea earthquake, magnitude 9.1, one of the most powerful ever recorded, ruptures the tectonic plates off the coast of Sumatra. The energy unleashed is equivalent to the detonation of 23,000 atomic bombs. This energy gives birth to a monster, a mega-tsunami. A wall of water, nearly 100 feet high, races across the Indian Ocean at the speed of a jetliner. It slams into the coastlines of 14 nations, erasing resorts, villages, and cities from the face of the earth. In Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, the scenes are apocalyptic. Thousand lives are lost. It is the triumph of primitive chaos over modern civilization. But at the heart of this zone of total destruction, at the very epicenter of the storm, lies a tiny point on the map, a place almost no one knows exists: North Sentinel Island. A place where time stopped 60,000 years ago. When the first satellite images revealed the island had not slipped beneath the waves, the international community and the Indian government assumed the worst. If concrete hotels and reinforced ports could not stand, what hope was there for primitive huts and a people living in the Stone Age? Days after the cataclysm, as the waters calmed, an Indian Coast Guard helicopter lifted into the air. Its mission was humanitarian: to assess the damage, to search for any sign of life, perhaps to drop food and medicine. The pilot flew low over the emerald canopy of the jungle, which appeared deceptively untouched. He expected to witness a scene of complete desolation. Instead, he saw something else. Below, on a strip of white sand, a figure emerged from the shadows of the trees. A lone man, dark and muscular. He was not waving his arms. He was not signaling for help. He was not seeking rescue. Instead, he performed an act that, in the context of the surrounding tragedy, seemed utterly irrational. He raised a longbow. Calmly, methodically, he drew back the string, took aim at the roaring steel machine in the sky, and loosed an arrow. This simple, almost primeval gesture, captured on film, would circle the globe. It was not an act of mindless aggression. It was the clearest, most unambiguous message imaginable. A message honed by millennia of isolation. Go away! We have survived. We do not need your help. Your world is not our world. What compels a people, standing on the brink of extinction, to attack those who may have come to save them? What ancient knowledge allowed them to endure a cataclysm that obliterated modern cities? And what deep, unhealed historical trauma has taught them that the greatest threat of all does not rise from the sea, but arrives from the sky? It has forged an absolute, unwavering hostility to the world beyond its shores. This island is not merely a point on a map. It is a black hole in our hyper-connected, globalized reality. A living paradox that compels us to question everything we believe we know about progress, about society, and about human nature itself. The story of a single arrow, loosed from a handmade bow, is but a starting point, an entry into one of the greatest and most unsettling enigmas of our time: the mystery of the last uncontacted people on Earth. To truly comprehend North Sentinel Island, one must first grasp its location, not only in space, but in time. It is a part of the Andaman archipelago, a chain of more than 300 islands scattered across the Bay of Bengal, between India and Myanmar. They are the peaks of a submerged mountain range, an ancient spine of rock reaching up from the sea floor. For centuries, these islands were a landmark on maritime trade routes, a place mentioned by Marco Polo and Arab merchants, often with a whisper of superstitious terror. Their accounts painted a portrait of ferocious cannibals, a reputation that shrouded the archipelago in fear. Today, most of these islands have been tamed, transformed into tourist destinations or military outposts. But North Sentinel remains an anomaly. Its area is just under 60 square kilometers, slightly smaller than the island of Manhattan. But if Manhattan is a vertical, man-made landscape of steel and glass, the very nerve center of global civilization, North Sentinel is its total, absolute negation. It is a horizontal, primordial world, hidden beneath a dense, impenetrable canopy of tropical forest. From orbit, it appears as an emerald jewel set in turquoise. But that setting is a lethal trap. A ring of treacherous coral reefs lurks just beneath the surface, a dragon's teeth, ready to tear the hull from any vessel that dares to venture too close. This is the island's first line of defense, engineered by nature itself. But its ultimate guardians are its people, the Sentinelese. A people whose very existence is a challenge to the chronology of human history. They belong to the Negrito peoples, descendants of the first great migration of Homo sapiens out of Africa. Genetic studies of their distant relatives on other Andaman islands, specifically the analysis of mitochondrial DNA passed down the maternal line, have traced their ancestry back to haplogroups M and N, among the most ancient non-African lineages known to science. This means their ancestors departed Africa between 60 and 70,000 years ago. They moved along the coast of South Asia, settling these islands when the world's oceans were far lower, when this archipelago may have been part of a single, contiguous landmass. Consider that for a moment. 60,000 years. An unbroken chain of existence stretching back into the mists of the Paleolithic, a living testament to a chapter of the human story we thought had long since closed. As the first glimmers of art flickered to life in the caves of Chauvet and Lascaux, while our European ancestors struggled for survival against the crushing ice, another people had already made their home on a remote island. The ancestors of the Sentinelese. They endured the last glacial maximum, when the oceans receded, and then the great warming that followed, when the rising tides of a new world swallowed the land bridge, cutting them off forever. They have been a silent audience to the whole of recorded time. They were there for the rise and fall of Sumer and Egypt, of Greece and Rome. They were witnesses to the birth of global religions, the age of discovery, the roar of the Industrial Revolution, and the thunder of 2 world wars. The entire frantic kaleidoscope of human history has passed them by, leaving them untouched. They are a living echo of the Paleolithic, a window into our own deepest past. Their true number remains a profound mystery. Estimates, based on fleeting, long-distance observations, range from as few as 40 to perhaps 250 individuals. But these are merely guesses. We do not know their language, a tongue that appears to share no roots even with the neighboring Andamanese tribes, a testament to millennia of absolute isolation. We do not know their social structures, their myths, their rituals, or the names they have given the stars. We know only that they live as hunter-gatherers in the purest form imaginable. They craft bows and arrows tipped with iron, the metal painstakingly salvaged from shipwrecks cast upon their shores and worked through cold forging. With these, they hunt wild boar, monitor lizards, and birds. They build simple outrigger canoes, not for great voyages across the open sea, but for fishing and gathering crabs and mollusks from the shallow reefs that guard their home. For them, the forest is no wild tangle. It is a garden and an apothecary. They gather fruit, the honey of wild bees, and tubers from a land whose medicinal secrets are intimately known to them. Their technology may be of the Stone Age, but their knowledge of their ecosystem is a form of perfection. Yet the most defining thing we know about them is their unyielding, ferocious desire to be left alone. This rejection of the outside world was not born in a vacuum. It was forged in the fire of tragic and bloody encounters with us. The history of contact with the Sentinelese is a short but brutally clear chronicle, where every chapter ends in violence, fear, and death. Each visit from outsiders, regardless of intent, has only reinforced a stark and brutal lesson in the minds of the islanders. From beyond the horizon comes nothing but calamity. For centuries, the island was little more than a smudge on nautical charts. In 1771, the British surveyor John Ritchie, sailing on the vessel Diligent, noted a multitude of lights flickering on the shore, the first official record of human life. But he did not land. For nearly another century, the island remained cloaked in shadow. Then, in the year 1867, the first act of the drama would finally unfold. They exist as a question posed to the modern world. What is the true meaning of progress? They are a mirror, reflecting not only what we once were, but what we have irrevocably lost in our relentless march forward. The Indian merchant vessel was caught in the merciless grip of a monsoon storm. Shattered against a coral reef, it broke apart just off the coast of an unknown island. 106 survivors, a mix of crew and passengers, managed to drag themselves ashore. They were exhausted, terrified, and utterly lost. For 3 days, they struggled to establish a camp. Then, from the dense jungle, warriors materialized. They moved without a sound. Their bodies were painted in ochre, their hands clutching longbows. Without warning, they let their arrows fly. The survivors, armed with nothing but sticks and stones, somehow fought them back, but it was only the beginning of a siege. Days later, a passing ship of the British Royal Navy spotted them, and a rescue was mounted. This incident became the first officially documented case of Sentinelese hostility. In the colonial consciousness, it cemented their reputation as bloodthirsty savages. But the darkest, most fateful chapter, the one that likely poisoned their relationship with outsiders forever, had been written in the year 1880. Its author was Maurice Vidal Portman, a young, ambitious, and in his own way, brilliant British colonial administrator. Portman was a product of his era, obsessed with a Victorian paternalistic understanding of anthropology. He saw the indigenous peoples of the Andaman Islands as living relics, specimens to be studied, catalogued, and, if possible, civilized before they disappeared from the earth. He landed on North Sentinel Island with a well-armed party. After days of scouring the jungle, they stumbled upon an abandoned village. Soon after, they managed to capture 6 of the islanders, an elderly couple and 4 small children. They were transported to Port Blair, the capital of these. The outcome was predictably horrific. In a foreign environment, confronted with pathogens their bodies had never known, influenza, measles, smallpox, they stood no chance. The elderly couple, whose immune systems were perfectly adapted to their isolated world, quickly fell ill and died in agony, defenseless against the invisible assassins carried by every outsider. Portman, perhaps realizing the catastrophic nature of his venture but not his personal culpability, decided to return the 4 remaining weeping children to the island. They were deposited on the shore with a heap of gifts, clothing, food, and trinkets. We will never know what story those children told their tribe. We will never know what virus they may have brought back with them, potentially unleashing a devastating epidemic that would be forever enshrined in their oral history as a curse delivered by people with pale skin. But it can be said with certainty that this experience of abduction, sickness, and death became the Sentinelese's first and most important lesson about the world beyond their shores. It was a lesson they would never forget. With each passing year, the wall of hostility grew higher. Every new encounter, with escaped convicts from a penal colony, with Japanese patrols during the Second World War, with stray fishermen lost at sea, added another brick. In 1974, a National Geographic film crew, guided by anthropologists, made a calculated attempt at friendly contact. They left offerings on the shore: coconuts, a doll, a live pig. The Sentinelese response was swift and unambiguous: a volley of arrows. One found its mark in the director's leg. The islanders then approached the gifts. The pig and the doll were unceremoniously buried in the sand. The coconuts they kept. Toward the end of the 20th century, Indian anthropologist Triloknath Pandit began a series of patient, gift-giving expeditions. For years, the islanders would accept the coconuts, but always from a threatening distance. Then, during a visit in 1991, something unprecedented occurred. For the first time, they did not raise their bows. They waded into the shallow water and took the coconuts directly from the researchers' hands. It remains the only recorded moment in history of peaceful, if still detached, contact. But the fragile peace was fleeting. Soon after, the Indian government, finally comprehending the mortal danger that outsiders posed to the tribe, ceased all such expeditions. The Sentinelese had learned their lesson through a history written in violence. Any stranger is a lethal threat, and their bows must always be ready. For decades, the world had viewed the Sentinelese as a living curiosity, a frightening anachronism. But as awareness of colonialism's devastating legacy grew, that perspective began to fundamentally change. Anthropologists and advocates realized this was not a display of innate savagery, but an incredibly successful and tragically necessary strategy for survival. To understand how successful, one only needs to witness the bitter fate of their neighbors, the other Andamanese tribes who could not, or would not, resist our world. Consider the Great Andamanese. Before the British arrived in the 19th century, they numbered around 5,000 souls, a proud confederation of 10 tribes, each with its own language and culture. They were the masters of their land. The establishment of a British penal colony at Port Blair in 1858 marked the beginning of their apocalypse. The Crown launched punitive expeditions, but its most effective weapons were never fired from a rifle. Epidemics of measles, influenza, and syphilis cut them down by the hundreds. By the dawn of the 20th century, fewer than 600 remained. Today, there are perhaps 50. They live on a reservation, wholly dependent on government rations. Their languages are nearly extinct, their culture all but erased. It was a slow, quiet genocide by contact. The Jarowa people resisted for far longer, but in the 1990s, a highway was carved through their ancestral forests, an artery that pumped the modern world, and all its afflictions, directly into their heartland. The Sentinelese saw this future and chose another path. Their aggressive isolation is not a mystery. It is a memory. It is a shield forged in the tragic histories of all the peoples who welcomed strangers to their shores and were erased for their trust. Their hostility is the last, desperate defense of a world that asks for nothing from us, but to be left alone. For the Jarowa people, it was a road to ruin. A strategic highway, the Great Andaman Trunk Road, carved through their ancestral lands, and with it opened a gateway for poachers, for loggers, and for something far more insidious: tourists. A grotesque spectacle was born: the human safari. Tour companies, for a fee, would ferry outsiders through this sovereign territory to gaze upon its people. From the windows of buses, tourists tossed bananas and biscuits, as one would to animals in a zoo. A people were debased, their dignity stripped, their culture corrupted. The Jarawa were suddenly faced with epidemics they had never known, and social ills against which they had no defense. Before the world's eyes, a society began to unravel in real time. Against this backdrop of tragedy, the legendary hostility of the Sentinelese began to appear in a different light. Their isolation, their fortress of arrows, was no longer seen as mere savagery. It was a manifestation of profound wisdom, a ferocious will to live. They were the only ones who had managed to say no, and to enforce that decision with the strength of their arms. This realization became a turning point. The global community through protection, the government of India formalized a policy of non-interference, establishing a 5-kilometer exclusion zone around the island and acknowledging that any attempt at contact was a mortal threat to the tribe. The door to the world of the Sentinelese was closed, but this time from our side, born of guilt and a newfound responsibility. We began to understand that the value of these isolated peoples lies not in what we can learn from them by dissecting their culture. Their ultimate value is in their very existence. They are living proof that other paths of development, other ways of being human, are possible. This forces us to look differently not only at them, but at all the astonishing cultures that have preserved a unique connection to a world our own civilization has long since lost, traded away for the promise of progress. To grasp the full depth of the physical and cultural adaptation Salland Fortress, we must journey into the transparent waters of Southeast Asia. Here, in the Miyek archipelago, off the coasts of Myanmar and Thailand, live the nomadic Moken people, known as the Sea Gypsies. Their lives are inextricably bound to the ocean. For most of the year, they dwell upon their traditional wooden boats, the kabang, which serve as both home and transport. They come ashore only during the monsoon season. For the Moken, the sea is not a boundary, it is their entire world. But their most astonishing secret lies hidden from the surface view. In 1999, a Swedish vision scientist named Anna Gislen discovered something incredible. Moken children possess the ability to see underwater with phenomenal clarity, twice the acuity of European children. They can consciously change the shape of their eye's lens and constrict their pupils to a pinpoint, adapting their vision to the aquatic realm as easily as we adjust to a dimming light. It is a living testament to the human body's capacity to merge with its environment, a reminder that our own world is not the only one possible, and that the deepest human truths are sometimes found not by looking forward, but by seeing with new clarity what we have already left behind. By transforming the human eye into the living aperture of a camera, they can focus underwater with breathtaking clarity. Small shells, sea cucumbers, and other edible creatures, a mere blur to the common eye, resolve into sharp relief. This is not an inborn mutation. It is a staggering example of neuroplasticity, the profound ability of the brain and body to remold themselves to the demands of an environment. But this is only the beginning. Further south, in the Coral Triangle between the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, live another people of the sea, the Bajau. Their capabilities push beyond the boundaries of what was, until recently, believed possible for a human being. The Bajau are truly amphibious. They can hold their breath for as long as 13 minutes and dive to depths exceeding 70 meters, all without a single piece of equipment. Their workday unfolds on the sea floor, where they hunt with harpoons in a world of silence and pressure. How can this be? The answer was found encoded in their very genes. In 2018, an international team of scientists published a study in the journal Cell that stunned the scientific world. They discovered that through natural selection, the spleen of a Bajau individual is, on average, 50% larger than that of their land-dwelling neighbors. The spleen acts as a biological aqualung, a living scuba tank storing a reserve of oxygen-rich red blood cells. During a dive, as the heart rate slows, the spleen contracts, releasing this oxygenated surge into the bloodstream, dramatically extending their time in the deep. Scientists even identified a specific gene, PDE10A, believed to be responsible for this phenomenon, the first documented case in history of a specific human genetic adaptation to freediving. The Moken and the Bajau represent a culmination of humanity's bond with the ocean. They are living proof of what our bodies and minds can achieve when allowed to exist for hundreds, even thousands of years in complete, unbroken harmony with the natural world. And this brings us to the Sentinelese. We cannot study their physiology or their genetics, but we can surmise that after 60,000 years of life on an isolated ocean-bound island, they have developed adaptations no less, and perhaps far more, astonishing. Their knowledge of the forest, of animal behavior, of the toxic and medicinal properties of plants is a living encyclopedia of survival, passed from one generation to the next, yet recorded in no book. Their immune systems are perfectly calibrated to the pathogens of their world, but tragically defenseless against our own. Their psyche, their social bonds, their entire worldview, all of it has been honed for a single, solitary purpose: to live and to thrive on their small patch of earth. The mystery of the Sentinelese is not a mystery of their supposed simplicity. It is the mystery of their perfection, an adaptability so complete, so refined to the absolute limit, that it has created a people perfectly suited for their world, and theirs alone. They were not trapped in a stone age. They had reached its evolutionary peak, a state of dynamic equilibrium with their world, a balance our own restless, progress-obsessed civilization has long since lost. It is this very thought, the fragility of our advancement, that compels a mental leap across oceans and continents to another part of the world and into another time. We journey into the humid, sweltering jungles of the Mexican coast, where 1,500 years before the rise of the Maya and 2,500 years before the Aztecs, the first great civilization of Mesoamerica flourished. The Olmec. They are rightly called the mother culture, for it was they who, as if from nowhere, created the cultural and technological foundation upon which all subsequent civilizations of the region would be built. The seeds of hieroglyphic writing, a complex ritual calendar, the sacred ball game played with a rubber sphere, the construction of pyramids, and the worship of a pantheon of gods later inherited by others. But today, of their former greatness, only jungle-choked ruins remain, and with them, the most enigmatic and awe-inspiring artifacts of pre-Columbian America: the colossal stone heads. Picture the scene. The mid-19th century. A Mexican farmer, clearing his fields, strikes a huge, moss-covered boulder. As he begins to dig, a superstitious terror grips him. From the black earth, a gigantic stone face stares back. With full lips, a broad, flat nose, and a strange, tight-fitting helmet. It was the first of 17 such heads found to this day. Each is carved from a single, solid block of volcanic basalt, weighing between 6 and 40 tons. Each depicts a unique individual, a clear portrait, presumed to be a powerful ruler. But here lies the insoluble riddle. The nearest quarries, where the Olmec mined this incredibly hard basalt, are in the Tuxtla Mountains, at a distance of 80 to 150 kilometers from there. How did a civilization with no draft animals, possessing only stone tools, manage to quarry these multi-ton monoliths, shape them with astonishing precision, and, most crucially, transport them across rugged terrain, through swamps, and over wide rivers? It is an engineering and logistical feat that impresses even today, an undertaking estimated to require the coordinated effort of more than 1,500 people over several months, just to move a single head. This is only part of the mystery. The Olmec built complex cities with sophisticated water systems, aqueducts made of meticulously carved and fitted basalt troughs. They were unsurpassed masters of working hard stone, creating exquisite figurines from jade and serpentine. Their world has vanished. Yet in the silent gaze of their stone kings, a profound question lingers. They worked with the very bedrock of the planet, shaping permanence with their hands, while our own age builds monuments of fleeting light and disposable code. Their legacy suggests that true advancement is not measured by the tools one possesses, but by the eternity one dares to grasp. And ritual axes, carved with an impossible intricacy. They commanded trade networks that stretched for hundreds of miles, dealing in obsidian, cacao, and other precious goods. They stood at the absolute zenith of their power and influence. And then, around 400 BC, they vanished. Their great cities were abandoned. Their monuments, the colossal heads, the massive altar thrones, the stone stelae, were deliberately mutilated, shattered, and ritually buried in the earth. Why? What could compel a people to annihilate the very symbols of their own authority and forsake their homes? Was it a peasant revolt against despotic rulers? An internal war of dynasties? Or did the cause come from without? A shift in the climate, a volcanic eruption that choked the rivers and blanketed the fertile fields in ash, rendering their world uninhabitable? We do not know. The Olmec left behind no written history to illuminate their fate. They left us only their stone faces, gazing silently from the depths of the ages, an eternal reminder of the fragility of greatness. The lesson of the Olmec is that the complexity of a civilization is no guarantee of its permanence. A great culture with centralized power, monumental architecture, and vast networks of commerce can prove to be incredibly brittle. It can collapse under the weight of its own internal pressures, or from the sudden, violent strike of the natural world, leaving behind nothing but an enigma. Now, juxtapose this with the Sentinelese. 60,000 years of continuous existence. No megaliths, no centralized state, no written word. Only a simple, flexible, egalitarian, and unbelievably resilient system for living, in perfect harmony with their environment. In the final calculus of evolution, which of them proved to be more successful? The question turns our entire conception of civilization on its head. Perhaps true strength lies not in the capacity to build empires, but in the simple, profound ability to endure. Our investigation inevitably returns to that small, isolated island in the Bay of Bengal. For in the 21st century, in an age of total globalization, the Sentinelese face the most profound threat in their entire 60,000-year history. And that threat is us. Not as direct aggressors with weapons in hand, but by the very fact of our existence, by our insatiable curiosity, and by our devastating impact on the planet. Poachers from Myanmar and Thailand illegally strip their waters, depleting their primary source of food. Tourist operators and private yachts ferry the curious to the borders of their forbidden zone, risking the introduction of catastrophic disease. And in the long term, global climate change and the slow, inexorable rise of the world's oceans threaten the very existence of their island home. In November of 2018, a tragic encounter on a forbidden shore became a brutal illustration of an irreconcilable conflict between two worlds. A young American missionary, John Allen Chow, driven by what he described as a religious calling, set out to convert a people he believed were the last on earth untouched by the modern age. He knew his mission was illegal. He knew it was mortally dangerous. He bribed local fishermen to carry him toward the island, cloaked by the darkness of night. His first attempt to make landfall was met with a volley of arrows. The Sentinelese, guardians of their isolated realm, drove him back. One of their arrows pierced the waterproof Bible he carried, yet he would not be deterred. In a journal, later recovered by the fisherman, he wrote of his inner turmoil. "Lord," he asked, "is this Satan's island? I don't want to die." But his faith proved stronger than his fear. He returned. The last time the fisherman saw him, he was paddling his kayak, alone, toward the beach. Later, from a distance, they witnessed islanders dragging his body across the sand before burying him from sight. The story ignited a firestorm of global debate. Some hailed Chow as a martyr for his faith. Others condemned him as a reckless, arrogant man who showed profound disrespect for the will of an entire people, endangering not only his own life, but theirs, risking the introduction of deadly pathogens to a population with no immunity. The government of India faced an impossible choice. Under pressure to retrieve the body, any such operation would have inevitably led to further violence and further risk to both sides. In the end, a difficult wisdom prevailed. The decision was made to leave things as they were, to honor the inviolable sovereignty of the island. The fate of John Chow is a microcosm of the entire Sentinelese conundrum. It exposes the unbridgeable gulf between our values and their reality. Our desire to save, to enlighten, to study, to help, from their perspective, forged by a bitter history of violent encounters, is seen as aggression, as a mortal threat. And this presents all of humanity with a series of agonizing ethical questions. Do we have the right to intervene in their lives, even with the most benevolent of intentions? If a devastating cyclone were to strike the island, or an epidemic begin to spread, should we violate their will to come to their aid, likely destroying their unique culture in the very process of saving them? Or must we stand aside and passively watch as one of the last truly ancient peoples on Earth vanishes? These are questions without simple or comfortable answers. They force us to question the universality of our own moral principles. Perhaps the highest expression of humanity, the deepest form of respect we can offer the Sentinelese, is to grant them the one thing they have so fiercely demanded: the right to be left alone. To recognize their absolute sovereignty over their land and over their destiny. To accept, finally, their right to say no to our world. In an era of ubiquitous satellite surveillance, of ever-present drones, of an insatiable media hunger and boundless human curiosity, can any corner of the Earth truly remain undiscovered, untouched, and free? The fate of North Sentinel Island is more than a remote anthropological curiosity. It has become an existential test for our entire civilization. A test of our ability to accept and respect the other in its most radical, most inscrutable form. How we navigate this challenge will determine not only the future of one small, proud tribe, but also our own understanding of what it means to be human in this intricate, diverse, and fragile world. Where is the boundary between humanitarian aid and cultural imperialism? Must we defend their isolation at any price, even if it leads to their demise from natural causes? Or does a moral duty command us to intervene, despite all the catastrophic risks? There may be no correct answer. The ultimate test, perhaps, is not in solving the paradox of North Sentinel Island, but in our capacity to respect it, to acknowledge a mystery that may not be ours to unravel, and to accept a frontier that we may never have the right to cross.